back to another episode of Greenlit. Today I'm chatting with Joe Lewis. Joe, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
So Joe, I know you have some pretty amazing credits and we'll dig into a few of them, but off the top, I know Fleabag, Mozart in the Jungle, 100-Foot Wave, Transparent, some really big heavy hitters that have spanned the last decade plus now of streaming at sort of its peak premiere level of television. Again, we can go so many different ways with this opening question, but just curious how you navigated into that position, getting involved with that level of projects and perhaps some of the Amazon backdrop of it all, which I know is a pretty big piece of some of the early days.
Sure. I'll try to give the answer in a succinct way, but the bottom line is, I was at the right place and right time. I was personally interested in technology and professionally working in television and had some experience. I'll describe that a line, but it was really, understanding pattern recognition within entertainment and television history and sort of just being at the nexus of business and creativity. I mean, the real short version I'll try to tell is, I started out, I was a temp at Comedy Central working for the head of the network, a woman named Lauren Correa, who's incredible and, now a good friend and has been a mentor for a long time. But I started out as her one-day temp, and through a fluke of events and circumstances and finding maybe the right job for me, I helped conceive of that show Tosh.O 8 or 9 months into the job. And it wasn't the most popular idea internally, but it was really loud and vocal getting it made. And ultimately, Lauren gave me $5,000 to make it as a live stage show at the Comedy Central stage. Another longer story, but the basic version is it ended up getting on the air. It didn't cost that much compared to other programming. It did exceptionally well from the time it came out. It ended up running something like 16 seasons and dozens of episodes a season, but it just, I saw that you could make something that was not that expensive, that a lot of people could think it was just an okay idea. It could become a wild hit. So I was at Comedy Central for a number of years, and I'd started to work on movies under that brand and was trying to get stuff set up with Paramount and the Comedy Central film brand, and led me to think I wanted to make movies full time. So after a number of years at Comedy Central, I went and took a job at Fox. And I was working at the movie studio, and just quickly realized that it felt a little bit like an old timey business, and was there for a while. And something I've always done and always recommend is just read a lot about the business that you're in. I read a ton about media. I read a ton about the history of entertainment. And I was just trying to understand, how things happened in the past and what's going on now. And one day I saw that pay TV rates had declined for 10 quarters in a row or something. And pay TV rates had never declined before. So this is around 2009 or so. I think I was at Fox. And I just like technology. And I think I'd gotten a TiVo, and I remember I was using what was called Amazon Unbox, was Amazon's original digital delivery program where you'd download a movie or TV show overnight, and then you could watch it the next day. So I wasn't loving the movie business. I had helped come up with and execute this very inexpensive, very successful show. I saw that you could watch high definition video for free over TiVo at the time. And I saw that pay TV rates were declining. So it became, it's one of those things in an instant, the idea sort of came to me, and you spend years unpacking it. But I saw that you could make a show, that I had the power to select and help conceive a show that would catch on with audiences. I saw that high definition programming was being streamed at home for free. And I saw that cable TV was probably going to go away, or at least had the first inklings it would go away. So I went full on into that idea. And I just realized there might be a moment where, I did some of the math and how much it would cost to stream stuff and how I could figure out how much it could cost to make something. And, my idea was to start my own comedy television network. And I was trying to start, an over-the-top Comedy Central in 2010. We were going to do half-hour shows, very inexpensively, and really, patterned off a show like Tosh.O, which was a format that had that had been around, a bulletproof format, and perfect. I don't want to call him up and coming because he was such a big talent at the time, but the perfect comedian at the
Yeah.
right stage of their career at the right time. And I was going to just try to do what I was doing as an exec at Comedy Central, but offer it for free to anyone in the world with ads. I partnered with someone I'd gone to USC with, and it was the first time I got my taste of trying to raise capital and trying to do so for a media business. But we were trying to raise a small amount of money to start my television channel. And at that time, separate from me, Amazon decided to get into television. I think Jeff Bezos had an idea that it would be a great offering for Prime memberships. So you had Amazon deciding to get into TV. They thought comedy was a better way in. It was less expensive. There was less competition, and they decided to get into the comedy stream business. At the time, I was trying to start a comedy streaming network. There could not have been many of us in the world doing it. And then truly through a ex-colleague of mine at Fox, had a good friend who worked at Amazon, and they passed on my resume and said, this guy's working on a similar problem. Met them in, let's say, late 2011, early 2012. And through just a normal set of job interviews, I ended up becoming the first person hired at Amazon to do television. And I was in LA, and it's a long story and a long way of saying how I was in the position to make Transparent and Mozart in the Jungle, and how I ended up running a television network not long after I started in television.
It's an amazing arc. I'm curious of the sort of big tenant projects that you had with Transparent and Mozart and Fleabag. Did you have any of those prior to Amazon? Like, did you,
No,
as
there
you were
was
putting
nothing.
things together? Got it.
No, there was nothing. No, I mean, the TV network I was starting was really going to be a low budget comedy channel. We were not gonna do anything scripted. I wouldn't call us premium. I think we would have been very funny, but it was not a very low budget comedy. And then when I got into Amazon, the resources were way different. The goals were way different. What we wanted to make, who we wanted to attract, how we were going to make them was, completely rethought.
How different was it coming from the 20th Century Fox world and that old timey business, as you say, into Amazon, especially when it was brand new in that business?
I mean, it was amazing. I mean, I still remember my first day at Amazon. I started in Seattle, the employee orientation, and they asked if it was okay if someone could follow me around with a stopwatch at every part of the orientation, getting my badge, filling out whatever forms I filled out, sitting through a video, and with the goal of measuring themselves and trying to improve the performance of the orientation. I mean, it was seconds after I started the job, and I just felt like I was at a company. Yeah, it was at a company that was going to do well or win. That was just really smart and driven, and it was great. I mean, it was also daunting, and you truly having a blank slate and no money to spend leaves you with a lot less choices than having a blank slate and a significant amount of money to spend. And you make a lot more mistakes, you learn a lot more things, and you have more chances to get lucky, which is what happens when a filmmaker like Joey Soloway in a script like Transparent comes in, and same with Mozart. But
can you go back in for a second onto Transparent? I'd love to go through how that came in. What was the context? What was the lead time from it coming into obviously it airing and becoming such a hit?
Sure. It's about 11 years ago, so I'm off by a little bit on any of the dates. Forgive me.
Yeah.
But Joey Soloway, their first movie called Afternoon Delight, which I'll plug and recommend, was just at Sundance, and they had won Best Director, and their agent sent around the movie. And I think said, if you like this, there's a script by the creator that you should read. I love the movie. And the script was Transparent, and it wasn't the exact script that we shot, but it was pretty close. With maybe only one significant difference. But came in one day and met with Joey in our office in the Sherman Oaks Galleria above the El Torito, and they told us about the show. We had read the script and was just blown away. We made I don't remember the exact deal, but we made a very favorable deal that probably no one else would have given to gain their trust, and they let us make it. We were lucky, and I think everyone involved was lucky to find each other and get to make that show at that time, and such an incredible pilot and first season and beyond.
Was there support for it right out of the gate? You know, as it came in, and obviously the Sundance film coming off the heels of that perhaps had some level of momentum, but was it obvious to multiple people to chase that?
There were no huge internal obstacles. We also didn't have a lot of oversight at that point. We were just such a small group, and we were making a pilot. So, relative to other projects at Amazon, although, it was public facing, so relatively, small investment. We liked the script, liked Joey, liked everything about the ideas for things to
Yeah,
come. And, I think the biggest question came, when we aired it. I think we talked about this back then, but it wasn't the most, didn't get the most, at the time, Amazon was airing its pilots publicly and looking at,
yeah,
metrics around them and public feedback to try to figure out what to make. And, I'll say, I think we talked about it then, it was not the most viewed pilot. Mozart in the Jungle, we also made that time, and there was a third pilot too. And so what it did get was just incredible reviews. I remember
yeah,
headlines like, the best pilot on TV is on Amazon. And so it was not well viewed. The biggest question that came up is when we went into the Greenlight meeting for it, even though it wasn't well reviewed, it was undeniably a great show. And, there was a question about would it get picked up, but, to Bezos's credit, he started that meeting essentially picking up the show based on its quality. And again, that's the other part I just loved about Amazon at that time. I felt like we had really strict rules that we're all open to talking about, and just coming up with the best solution. So yeah, that was the
yeah.
beginning, and then made the show in a traditional but maybe unconventional way. And yeah, I'm just so proud of that first season.
Did that momentum? I mean, at least always in my experience, momentum begets momentum in this business. Did you find that to be obviously the case at such a huge scale now with all these resources with Amazon behind you and someone like Bezos championing quality and wanting it to be out there as a flag in the ground? Did that lead directly into something like Fleabag coming together? I know you and I have had this chat in the past, but for those listening, it's such an awesome story, and that show as well was such a zeitgeisty changing of the momentum type show.
Yeah, I mean, it was part of our flywheel there, and and a hugely important early part that made the flywheel spin a lot faster. Winning the Golden Globe with that show, you saw viewership spike up, and then say Mozart in the Jungle, you mentioned earlier, the other pilot we greenlit it alongside Transparent, then won the Golden Globe the next year, and you see both viewership spikes, and you saw something signaling that one wasn't a fluke, that we were trying to do things that were quality and different. And at the time that those came out, the only show I really can remember pointing to was Larry Sanders. Was the kind of show that we wanted to do, that had a world that was serialized storytelling. And with serialized storytelling, you tend to need things that have a little more drama or reality to them. It's just hard to get people to invest in incredibly long stories unless there's something more than surface level there. And there weren't a lot of things that we could point to. So, I think discovering that serialized storytelling works, that it would be, you could penetrate culture and it would be more compelling as a series, I think, and just having it work on Transparent helped us, lean into doing that a lot more. There's probably another, some alternate history where we made standalone one-off episodes for a while.
Yeah,
I don't want to ignore that, there was House of Cards and Lilyhammer and other things being made in the market that were embracing it, but I don't think it was it seems obvious now, and it was more controversial then to do things that were super serialized and
yeah.
risky subjects.
Can you talk a little bit about Phoebe Waller-Bridge? And obviously, just such an amazing performer, crazy, unique voice. Someone once said to me, the best pieces of art, when you think back and reflect on them, they can only possibly be told by one specific artist in one specific moment. And that show and that experience, I remember seeing the first episode, like you knew you had seen something that only one person's voice could possibly give you that experience from. Just curious, and I know again we've sidebarred on this a little bit, but for those that
Yeah.
haven't been privy to our conversations, go as wide or as deep as you want to, because I think this is such a fun one about how it got greenlit, how small it was early days, and then the groundswell that built around that project.
Sure. I mean, maybe things that you might, not know, or, might not be obvious, as, sure it's been talked about publicly since, but there was not a lot of competition for the show. So it's nice, to hear that the pilot, the first episode is great and, is so obviously speaks to greatness to come. But, there was an original pilot that the BBC spent a little bit of money on that everyone saw and everybody passed on. My personal, connection to it or our story, we had the pilot. I was meeting with my comedy team at the time. I can remember the conference room at Amazon. We were waiting for some people to get there to start. So we just said, let's put it on this show and let's just watch it till they get here or till we don't want to watch it anymore and can pass on it. Obviously, we ended up watching the whole show, loved it. Then we got on the phone and had a normal, what's going to happen? Tell me about the show. Tell me, meet the person. And, Phoebe was just incredible from the start. And it's just what you want to get out of every creator, someone that has a strong point of view and knows what they're writing and knows why they're writing it and has a good sense of the story. And, I think the thing to know with that show is, not only is Phoebe an incredible writer, an incredible actor, but I think, what you can't see on screen is, the temperament that leads to a show like that, which is like a relentlessness and a want and a drive to just keep going over it. Some people don't need to be told it's time to do a new pass. A lot of the very best creators and filmmakers I work with have this exact, not uniformly, but almost uniformly, this exact skill of just going over it over and over and over again. I think you can watch something like Fleabag, maybe it feels like, inspiration struck and that show was written down, but that show was written through draft after draft, pushed along by Phoebe more than anybody else, and incredible other producers on the show, and Jack and Harry Williams and Lydia and Sarah at Two Brothers, and there's just the cast themselves. But it just goes back to a relentless leader with an incredibly tuned instrument. And you just hope things get, when you're doing drafts or cuts, you always want them to get, it always feels like they can maybe at best get 30% better. And I look at season 1 to season 2 of Fleabag and maybe see something that even exceeded that, through the energy of no one but the energy mainly of Phoebe, almost entirely of Phoebe.
So curious on that. Obviously, it ends at season 3. Feels like something that everyone wanted more of. Was it always known that it would end? Was it a contained upfront, or was it a Phoebe decision? How did that come about?
I mean, there was a chance that there wasn't even in a season 2. I think, assuming a lot of your listeners know, historically the British system has been set up differently than the American television system. The American television system, you're not allowed to start unless there's a number of options on you that will make it not your decision to continue. The British system historically has been totally different. Do shows 1 season at a time, and if the creator wants to keep going, they can do it. If not, they'll do another show. So there was never anything promising another season of the show. And I remember when Phoebe had it, and the idea that opened it up. And I think I think what's also great is there wouldn't be a season 3 without an idea to open it up again, or just a real reason for it to exist. But I'm also a fan of the show. In addition to being a part of it, I wish there was a season 3 like everybody else, but if there is, I want it to be really, really good.
Yes. Curious on that show. Typically on here on Greenlit, we talk about how did something get made? Would it get made today? Would the barriers to getting it made be similar, different? Like someone yourself who's a student of the film business, television business, entertainment business at large, and the history of all of it. Does this show get made today? If it does, how? Like you said, maybe that relentlessness, you still find a way through, and you figure out how to get over the speed bumps, even if they're different bumps in 2023 versus 10 years ago, 8 years ago, however long it was. But just curious how you see that in terms of the broader market. Does this get made today? If so, what's the path to doing so?
I mean, it's so hard to say. I think the easy answer would be no, because but maybe that's just the self-serving answer too. The answer is I don't know. I think the original pilot that the BBC made was not incredibly expensive. So yes, I could see them or someone taking that roll of the dice for what that cost and what that project was. And then the question is, like, with that pilot, what it was, could I see someone else coming in I think maybe it wouldn't be a traditional distributor now. Maybe there's, and this is what a lot of the focus of my current company is. So maybe it is still a self-serving answer, but I think there might be other companies that come in and can pick up what before
Right.
might have been the American portion of it and help produce it independently, or take some other part of the world and pay for that. And that was the goal. I mean, the thought puzzle when I started Amplify Pictures, my current company, is all right. So I've done this. I've done this since Tosh.O, and I've had shows that have gone well. And on that one, or on Fleabag, what would the difference be in the outcome if the resources were that of Amazon or resources that I had, paid myself or raised. And so I would hope that a show like Fleabag gets made today. I would hope that my company or a competitor would step in and pay the delta and get that show made. So, I don't know that it would be made the same way, but I'd like to, believe something that good would be made. And frankly, I'd like to believe that my company would be the one to find it and do it again. So
I love that.
that's
Well,
that's the answer.
it's a good segue into Amplify and maybe a 100-foot wave in general. Um, Again, for those sort of listening, this is being recorded literally last night. Season 2 premiered of 100-foot wave. Is that right, Joe?
Yes, and for anyone who's listening day and day, we're the lead into Succession for the next 6 weeks, which I don't know what that means in terms of viewing anymore, but it sounds great to say out loud, and I'm excited to be next to it.
And so, talk a little bit about that show. I know I was obsessed with season 1. I've not
Succession.
watched.
Let's talk about it. I cannot believe Logan was killed 3 episodes in.
I know, ruining it for everyone.
Sorry, don't. I'll record a spoiler for the start of this, but really, really, really enjoy it. Okay, sorry, we can talk about 100-foot wave.
It's all good. It's all good. I mean, 100-foot wave is so unbelievably unique, and it's also so different than the other things you had done. So at least that, obviously, the big sort of comedies and the big splashy things like Transparent and Fleabag that have such a different life than something like 100-foot wave. But 100-foot wave is just an amazing, amazing, again, like you said, exploration into finding the next really amazing thing instead of it just having to be derivative off of some model that just because it worked before it's going to work again. This feels totally different. And how it came about, I'd love to hear. Similarly, how did this one manifest?
Sure. So, I had a little bit of documentary in my background. I did Amazon's, like what I think are Amazon's first 2 doc series. One was called Long Strange Trip. It was an incredible doc series about the Grateful Dead from the filmmaker Amir Bar-Lev. And the other is a really good show, a small show called The New Yorker Presents. Both of those are still on Amazon now. People should check out. New Yorker presents a bunch of incredible documentary filmmakers taking on stories from the New Yorker. We've done a little bit of documentary. And like I said, I was working out this thought puzzle. Could I just find and finance the next Fleabag myself? And I was raising money to try to do that, start an independent scripted television studio. Then, one of those fluke lucky things happen. So my wife's second cousin, Nicole McNamara, is married to one of the biggest big wave surfers in the world, Garrett McNamara. Now Garrett and Nicole are the leads of 100-foot wave. I hadn't met them before. They lived in Hawaii. I hadn't spoken to them, but they reached out to my wife and asked me if they could ask me for some advice. And they had an idea about a project that was a little bit different than what the show became, but they wanted to talk. And met up with them, gave them some advice, and they asked me if I wanted to produce it. So at that point, I was trying to do scripted television shows on my own, but I met them, and Garrett, both of them. But Garrett is so compelling.
Yeah.
And
pretty intense dude. Pretty intense. Again, back to your comment around relentless. I mean, that dude is like the definition of relentless.
Yeah, but he's also funny and charismatic, and I think as intense as he is, he's just equally fun. And you're just it's what you're always looking for. Now I get articulated because I've done a lot more documentaries since, but just a great character in a great world. And Chris Smith was someone I'd known for years through a mutual friend, and we would ski at Sundance together because the mountains were open, and with our mutual friend, but we hadn't worked together. And I was a huge fan of his, truly from the beginning of his career. American Movie is just one of those projects that had a big impact on me, and reached out to him about the idea. And and asked if he was interested in surfing, and he said definitely not. And luckily, he thought it was interesting enough that he agreed to meet with Garrett and Nicole over Zoom, and so we got together, we Zoomed with them. And then 2 weeks later, we started shooting the show. We just sent an camera operator out. And I don't think we've stopped shooting the show almost for 4 years since. And now season 2, like you said, just premiered the other night. We've been shooting all last winter too. And the show just keeps going. So it really just proved out this model. We made 6 episodes before we started working with HBO and licensed it to them, and it just proved that you can make series on your own. It can be a great win for the distributors. The show won an Emmy for best cinematography. We were up for best show. Really, it's really just a great, inspiring show with incredible high-level filmmaking from one of the world's best filmmakers. And it solved the problems that I was finding with producing, which was that it's incredibly slow. You don't have a lot of agency, and even if your show does well or wins all the awards, there's no bonus. So, by taking a lot of risk at the beginning and just going to make the show, it turns all those things on their head. So, that was 100 Foot Wave, and continues to go on, and very happy with season 2. Hope everyone gets a chance to watch it.
Can you take it further, Joe? I mean, that model and that sort of, say, entrepreneurial reinventing approach to making a series, can you, or are you taking that and applying it elsewhere? Is that one of the cornerstones, I believe it is, of Amplify in general, and how you think about, no pun intended, the sort of next wave of building a meaningful entertainment company that can produce its own content?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing, Amplify was born out of trying to solve those problems of not just for producing, but any creative person. How can you make it move quickly? How can you be incentivized when it does well? And how can you have agency? How can you get to explore the ideas in your head with yourself and your partners as the guide? And so it worked out. 100 Foot Wave was the test. Since then, we've continued to finance a number of shows. The company has grown, so I have more help and more resources. And there's a number of documentaries that we're financing behind it. And it's a really great model. We are, the next big thing for us is proving that it works on the scripted side. And there's a project we're hoping to shoot later this year abroad that will fit into this. And again, I just think there's, in movies historically, or at least since the 70s, there's been an escape route for creative energy. You could make an independent film. There's just not the same opportunity in television. And right now in TV, it's tangible, the amount of creative energy that's bottled up and looking for somewhere else to go. And I have no doubt that the biggest shows of all time, maybe the best shows of all time, never made it out of development. No one ever bought them, and if they did, they didn't make them, and if they didn't make the pilot, they didn't order them to series. And I think those are the opportunities we're looking for. We're looking for those, not just shows that aren't bound. I think this is the best model for anyone who's making television, because it aligns you with the success of the show, you as the creator. So it's a model that we're heavily invested in and putting all of our time and resources in. And truly think it's great for every part of the television business. For distributors or streamers, we get to say you don't have to worry about the budget or the schedule, or if it's good, we'll show it to you first. We'll be responsible for the overage. And this only works if we can make a show for less than the cost that it would make you to do it. For creators, we move quickly, and for ourselves, we just get to make TV, which is what we love.
I appreciate it. I know we're tight on time, and I want to be respectful of that. I usually end with the question, which is, if you could tell your younger producer or filmmaker self anything, knowing what you know now and knowing the business the way you do now, what does that look like?
I mean, I would tell myself to educate myself as much as possible, to read everything you can on the business that you want to be in. And I didn't figure this out till I was in my say mid to late 20s, that you can really you can figure out what to do. No one teaches you. I went to USC Film School, one of the best film schools in the country.
Yeah.
No one ever taught me much about the film business.
Right.
How do the gears actually touch? How do you get things actually made? How does the business actually work? Where is the business going? I would have told myself same thing, probably what I tell to, people who ask advice now is just, you gotta get into the next big area first. And the way to
Yeah.
figure out what that is to read a lot about what's going on now and to read a lot about what happened before. And then you have to go full in and really just learn how to like listen to your internal conviction about ideas. I want to tell myself to like be less, anxious about it and just chill and it'll be fine. But then I always wonder if like that's what made me, get the other stuff done. So I would not tell myself to chill out, but I should.
Yeah. There's
And
a
I
there,
would tell
there's
myself to.
Yeah, no, not to cut you off on that point. There's an amazing quote, which is if you're not worrying, you need to be worried, and if you're worried, you don't need to be worrying, because ultimately those personality types that take care of themselves one way or the other. So I'm a huge believer in that. It's an unfortunate thing to bear on your back all the time, especially when you're trying to get things made and build companies and work with creatives and work in a very challenging, changing, evolving business. But I just love that idea. If you are worried, you don't need to be. So you've got it figured out. You're worrying about it
Yeah.
nonstop enough.
The trick is always to know when it's going to be. You have to trick yourself into knowing when there are real problems, knowing that they'll be fine.
Right.
But also just feeling, I feel like the future's constantly, happening and you're just trying to, not let it happen to you and be a part of it. And, it's why I get so excited, about seeing things about AI and new tools. And I don't know how they'll be used and there's scary things about them, but just it seems, when the future becomes tangible, that's when, ideas start firing. And, I guarantee, if I was starting now, I would tell myself to go into global TV. I would love to move abroad when I was young. And I think it's going to be one of the next big things. So yeah, somehow you got to worry, but just enough to motivate yourself, and not so much that you
Yeah,
don't solve. Know that most problems get solved. You've
that's
hired
right.
right and work with great people.
Thank you again, dude. Really appreciate you joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
We'll talk soon.